Kindness is never wasted, even when no one is watching. Emily Parker wiped down the last table at Murphy's Diner, her black apron slightly damp from the morning rush, and noticed a man at the corner table struggling to find exact change for his coffee. Without hesitation, she slid a $10 bill across the counter to cover his total, her hands steady despite exhaustion from her 12-hour shift. Across town, Ethan Caldwell, a 35-year-old CEO, scrolled through the local news on his tablet when a small video clip caught his eye. Security footage from the diner showing a young waitress helping a stranger with quiet dignity. Her calm movements, the gentle smile she gave, and the way she adjusted the napkins perfectly without drawing attention made him pause. Curiosity piqued. Emily moved to clear another table, unaware of the ripple her simple act of generosity had caused. But the diner's regulars couldn't stop whispering about the scene, some even leaving a comment online, sharing their admiration for her selflessness. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, watching the video on repeat, feeling an unusual pull of respect and intrigue. As Emily balanced a tray of sparkling water and sandwiches, she hummed softly to herself, almost as if narrating her own quiet story. And for anyone watching the live stream of the diner, it felt like an invitation to notice the unnoticed, to like, comment, or follow her example in small acts of goodness. Outside, the late autumn wind rattled the diner's windows, leaves swirling like fleeting thoughts, and Emily moved from table to table with a composed grace that seemed out of place for someone so young. The camera lingered on her hands as she wiped a spot of syrup from the counter, and then on her eyes, calm yet sharp, catching every detail. Ethan's phone buzzed incessantly with alerts about the viral clip, but he barely glanced at them. His focus remained fixed on the quiet power emanating from Emily's every motion. He leaned forward, imagining the story behind those steady hands and gentle eyes, sensing that there was more to her than the uniform and simple apron suggested. Meanwhile, Emily returned the plate to the kitchen, exchanging a brief nod with her colleague, unaware that her life was about to intersect with someone who measured the world in billions in influence, and that one small act of kindness would set into motion a chain of events that neither of them could yet anticipate. Emily Parker returned to the back of the diner, setting down her tray with a soft clink and wiping her hands on the apron that had seen too many long shifts and too little rest. She paused for a moment, catching her reflection in the stainless steel of the coffee machine, noting the tired lines around her eyes and the way her blonde hair had loosened from its neat ponytail. She was 24, working part-time to save enough for community college, living alone in a small apartment 5 blocks away, and taking care of her younger brother who was just starting high school. Life had taught her to move quietly through the world, unnoticed, and she had perfected the art of blending in while still holding her own standards. The morning rush had left the diner buzzing faintly in the background, the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread mingling with the cold autumn air that crept through the doorway every time a customer entered. Emily adjusted a stack of menus and glanced at the clock. Another hour until lunch service would begin, another hour of careful observation of customers, remembering faces, anticipating needs, and maintaining the grace that had quietly become her shield. Across town, Ethan Caldwell leaned back in the large leather chair of his glass-walled office, the city sprawling beneath him, sunlight glinting off the skyscrapers like scattered gold. He tapped his fingers lightly on the polished mahogany desk, replaying the security footage from the diner in his mind, noticing the subtle way Emily had smiled at the stranger, the precision of her movements, and the calm authority she exuded without speaking a word. Something about her presence unsettled him, a curiosity he could not shake, the sensation that he was witnessing competence and integrity in their purest, simplest form. His assistant had already informed him that this small act of kindness had been mentioned online, drawing attention from the local news outlet, and yet Ethan found himself less interested in the virality than in the girl herself. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes narrowing as he imagined the story behind her composed demeanor, the disciplined posture, and the focus that suggested a history of quiet resilience. Meanwhile, Emily moved to the side station to refill the syrup and sugar containers. Each motion measured, deliberate, and precise, like she was performing a ritual she had learned from necessity and practice. She paused briefly, listening to the soft clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with being reliable in a world that often ignored the effort behind small gestures. Outside, a breeze swept through the narrow alley beside the diner, ruffling the edges of menus taped to the windows, and for a moment, Emily allowed herself a quiet thought, wondering if her actions really made any difference, if anyone would notice the care she put into even the smallest tasks. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan Caldwell had made a decision. He wanted to know the story behind the girl who moved with such grace and command despite a life so modest, and he planned to see for himself what drove that careful precision. The afternoon light stretched across the linoleum floor of the diner, casting long shadows that mirrored the growing anticipation neither of them could yet name, and Emily continued her work, unaware that in just a few hours, her ordinary day would intersect with someone whose world measured worth in millions. And that moment of quiet observation was the first thread of a story that was only beginning to unfold. Emily Parker moved through the diner with quiet determination, her mind juggling the small details of her life, like balancing a tray of fragile glasses. Her younger brother, Jake, was waiting at home, his homework stacked neatly on the small kitchen table, and she had promised herself she would make it in time to help him review algebra equations before dinner. Every shift was a delicate dance of efficiency and patience, each customer treated with a professional calm she had learned to cultivate after years of being overlooked. She took a moment to refill the sugar containers, her emerald green eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds, as though expecting someone important to arrive, though she could not have imagined who. Outside, the late morning sunlight glinted off the frost still clinging to the windows, and she felt the pull of something intangible, a sense that her ordinary actions might carry weight far beyond the walls of the diner. Ethan Caldwell sat in his office, the city sprawling beneath him like a living network of ambition and power, and he could not stop thinking about the composure in her posture, the way she had smiled at the stranger without seeking recognition, the careful attention she gave to every motion. It was as though she had an unspoken code, a principle that guided her silently, but with unmistakable authority. He tapped a finger against his desk, considering the improbable chance that someone so young could possess such quiet mastery over herself, and he wondered what her story was, what had shaped her into the person who could command attention without demanding it. Emily moved to the beverage station, pouring water into a tall glass with deliberate care, and she allowed herself a small sigh of satisfaction at the perfection of the pour. Her mind wandered to the scholarship application she had to complete, the fees she needed to save, and the countless shifts ahead that would test her resolve. But for a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a world where her efforts were seen and valued. Meanwhile, Ethan reviewed the footage again, noticing subtleties he had missed the first time. The precision of her movements, the measured way she greeted regulars, the warmth in her eyes when she offered help without expectation. He leaned back, letting the chair creak under him, and felt a rare twinge of admiration and intrigue, a curiosity that pressed him to learn more about her, to understand how someone could carry such dignity in a life so ordinary by the world's standards. Emily adjusted the chairs in the corner, the polished wood gleaming slightly in the ambient light, and she allowed a fleeting thought to cross her mind, wondering if small acts could ever change the trajectory of her life, if simple kindness could be a bridge to something unexpected. The diner hummed softly around her, plates clinking, coffee machines gurgling, and through it all, her focus remained absolute, unwavering, a testament to years of discipline, responsibility, and quiet pride. Ethan's mind wandered further, imagining her at home, the discipline spilling over into every corner of her life, the sacrifices she must make, and the strength it must require to move through the world with integrity under such pressure. He felt an unfamiliar pull, a need to witness her world firsthand, to see the measure of her character beyond the frame of a fleeting video clip. And somewhere in the back of the diner, Emily Parker paused, briefly, smoothing the edge of a napkin with a meticulousness that suggested more than habit, hinting at a life forged in resilience, and neither of them yet knew how close their paths would soon cross. The lunch crowd had begun to thin, leaving Emily Parker with a momentary pause as she rearranged the silverware on the tables. Her eyes flicked to the entrance where a man in a tailored navy suit had stepped inside, scanning the room with a quiet intensity that made her stomach tighten slightly. Ethan Caldwell, having decided to see the diner firsthand, approached the counter with measured steps, the polished leather of his shoes clicking softly against the linoleum floor. Emily noticed him immediately, a subtle awareness sharpening her movements as she poured water into a glass with meticulous care, her hand steady despite a sudden flutter of nerves. He cleared his throat lightly, drawing her attention without the need for words, and she offered a polite nod, keeping her posture straight and professional. "Good afternoon," Ethan said, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. "I saw what you did earlier with that customer. That was thoughtful of you." Emily paused, considering her words, aware that her routine interaction was now laden with significance. "It was nothing," she replied softly, keeping her eyes focused on the glass as if it anchored her composure. Ethan leaned slightly against the counter, observing the subtle confidence in her gestures, the way she managed each movement with a precision that hinted at discipline beyond the ordinary. "Nothing," he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "And yet it left an impression on everyone who saw it, including me." A faint warmth crept into Emily's chest, though she maintained her calm exterior, aware that any sign of self-consciousness could undermine the image she had cultivated through years of quiet resilience. Ethan studied her for a long moment, the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes speaking of hard work and perseverance, the kind of character that could not be manufactured or feigned. He could sense that her kindness was intrinsic, not performed for attention, and it unsettled him in a way that made him lean closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "You handle this place with careful grace," he said, nodding toward the table she had just attended, "and yet you seem untouchable in the process." Emily allowed herself a brief glance, meeting his steel-gray eyes with a measured steadiness that conveyed neither arrogance nor submission, simply acknowledgement of his observation. "I do what I can," she said quietly, returning the glass to its tray. Ethan's gaze lingered, curious and quietly admiring, as he felt the first threads of a connection forming, built on mutual recognition of effort and character rather than words or titles. Outside, the wind rattled against the diner windows, carrying a hint of early winter chill, and inside, the hum of conversation and clinking cutlery created a rhythm that underscored the quiet tension between them. Emily moved toward the next table, setting down a cup of coffee for a waiting customer, her mind aware of Ethan's presence without letting it intrude, while he considered what it might mean to know someone who carried integrity and calm in a world that demanded noise and assertion. Each glance exchanged, each subtle gesture, built a silent understanding, a tentative bridge between two very different lives, and both felt the curious pull of anticipation for what might come next as the ordinary rhythm of the diner was quietly reshaped by their encounter. Just as Emily was wiping down the last table before the lunch rush, a commotion at the entrance drew her attention. A young man in a crisp suit hurried inside, his face pale and anxious, clutching a folder that had clearly seen better days. Without thinking, Emily stepped forward, offering him a calm smile and a cup of water. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice steady, though her heart raced. The man blinked, startled by her attentiveness, and muttered something about losing an important document before collapsing into the nearest chair. Ethan Caldwell, standing at the counter a few feet away, observed silently, his brow furrowing as he took in the scene. Emily quickly guided the man to a quieter corner, assessing the situation with an instinct born of long hours managing crises in a high-pressure environment. She retrieved a pen and notebook from the service station, ready to jot down details, when she noticed the folder contained confidential contracts from a major client, information that, if mishandled, could have catastrophic consequences. Her eyes met Ethan's, and without a word, he understood the gravity of the moment. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This could cost millions if it falls into the wrong hands," he said, the rare edge of concern in his tone catching Emily off guard. She nodded, absorbing the weight of responsibility, her mind racing through solutions. Calmly, she instructed the man to breathe and focus, guiding him through reconstructing the lost data with her precise questions and suggestions. Each step revealed not only her resourcefulness, but also her ability to maintain composure under pressure. Ethan's respect for her deepened. He had seen intelligence before, but not this combination of empathy, quick thinking, and unflappable presence. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the diner thickened, the background hum of patrons fading into a blur as Emily navigated the situation with quiet authority. The man's panic slowly ebbed, replaced by relief and gratitude, and when the folder was finally secure, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and incredulity. Ethan, observing from the counter, felt a rare spark of admiration that went beyond professional recognition. This was a person whose actions could alter outcomes, quietly yet profoundly. Emily, breathing lightly, returned the folder to the man and gestured toward the seat he had been occupying, her expression calm, though inside her mind raced with the possibilities this encounter might open. Outside, the autumn sunlight reflected off the diner's windows, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the threshold of fate itself, hinting that this day, which began like any other, had just pivoted in a way that would change everything for everyone present, and both Emily and Ethan felt the subtle thrill of anticipation for what might come next. The diner had quieted to a soft murmur, but Emily Parker could feel a subtle tension building in the air, as though the ordinary rhythm of the day had shifted into something more fragile and unpredictable. A sudden knock at the entrance drew her gaze, and she noticed two sharply dressed men entering, their expressions a mix of impatience and curiosity. Her heart skipped a beat, sensing that this would not be a typical service interaction. Ethan Caldwell, standing near the counter, shifted his weight, watching intently, his sharp eyes tracking every micro-expression as Emily moved toward the newcomers with practiced composure. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice calm and measured, though internally her pulse quickened. The taller man stepped forward, handing her a folded document that seemed to weigh more than its paper thickness suggested. Emily's fingers brushed the edges as she opened it carefully, revealing pages of financial statements, contracts, and sensitive data that had been mistakenly delivered to the diner. Her mind raced, calculating risks, potential errors, and the consequences if anything went wrong. Ethan moved closer, his voice low but firm. "Do not make a mistake here. This is beyond a simple delivery. One wrong move, and it could cost millions." Emily nodded, her green eyes focused, scanning each page with methodical precision while the men waited impatiently. She guided them to a quieter corner, gesturing for them to sit, and began to organize the documents, pointing out inconsistencies and clarifying confusing entries. Her calm authority drew the attention of the diner staff, some stopping mid-task to watch, sensing the unusual gravity of the moment. Ethan watched silently, impressed by the seamless combination of intelligence, empathy, and quick judgment she displayed, noting the rare ability to command attention without raising her voice or demanding authority. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, rattling the glass as if urging the events inside to accelerate, and Emily could feel the subtle shift in power dynamics, the tension between responsibility and unpredictability tightening around her like an invisible rope. She spoke carefully, questioning the men about missing signatures and unexpected figures, her words guiding them toward clarity while maintaining absolute control of the situation. Ethan felt a surge of anticipation, the kind that only comes when observing someone capable of extraordinary composure in the face of potential chaos. The men exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of Emily's competence pressing on them, and even the hum of the diner seemed to fade into silence, leaving only the delicate interplay of observation, decision, and quiet command. A stray napkin slipped from the counter, and Emily bent to retrieve it with precise movements, her focus unwavering despite the subtle distraction, demonstrating a control that seemed almost magnetic. Ethan's eyes followed her every motion, realizing that her impact was not just in her actions, but in the confidence and calm she radiated, compelling even the most impatient to follow her lead. The documents were gradually sorted, reconciled, and accounted for, and as the last page was placed in order, the men looked at Emily with a mix of awe and reluctant admiration, acknowledging without words that they had underestimated her. Ethan's expression softened slightly, a hint of a smile touching the corner of his lips as he Observe the transformation of the moment, from potential disaster to a testament of quiet mastery and integrity. And in that brief pause, Emily allowed herself a small breath of relief, aware that the ordinary rhythm of her day had intersected with extraordinary circumstances, setting the stage for consequences neither she nor Ethan could yet fully anticipate, leaving a lingering tension that promised even greater challenges and revelations just beyond the next hour. As the two men left the diner, clutching the now-complete folder with a mixture of relief and lingering tension, Emily Parker felt a shiver of unease slip through her calm exterior. Something in the alignment of the documents had seemed off, a subtle discrepancy she could not ignore despite the immediate resolution. She glanced toward the corner where Ethan Caldwell had been watching, noting the way his eyes lingered on her, sharp and calculating, as if he had already sensed what she had only vaguely intuited. "There is more here than meets the eye," he murmured under his breath, though Emily did not hear him. She moved back behind the counter, her hands fumbling slightly as she rearranged the silverware, her mind replaying the details of the folder, the margins marked with faint pencil notes, the unusual sequence of entries, the signatures that seemed almost too deliberate. A small envelope had slipped from between the pages, its edges worn, addressed to no one in particular, but the handwriting unmistakably familiar to her. Emily bent to pick it up, her fingers brushing the paper with a sudden rush of curiosity and dread. What was meant to be a routine act of help now hinted at layers of complexity she could not yet understand. Ethan, noticing her discovery from across the diner, raised a hand slightly, a gesture of silent acknowledgement that whatever she held in her hand was significant. The diner's hum of conversation seemed to fade, the air thick with anticipation as if time itself had slowed, every moment stretching in anticipation of revelation. Emily carefully opened the envelope, finding a single sheet inside, densely written with codes and references that seemed meaningless at first glance but prickled her memory, stirring a faint recollection of a conversation long ago about oversight and accountability in high-stakes financial dealings. Her green eyes widened slightly, a flicker of realization passing across her face, though she kept her expression neutral, concealing the rapid calculations and questions racing through her mind. Ethan leaned closer, his voice quiet but edged with intrigue. "You see it too, do you not?" he asked, though she did not respond immediately, instead scanning the sheet for connections, patterns, anything that would make sense of the anomaly. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the diner windows and casting moving shadows across the floor, shadows that seemed to echo the uncertainty building inside. A small bell rang as another customer entered, but Emily barely noticed, her focus entirely consumed by the implications of what she had uncovered. For a moment, a subtle tension hovered between them, the weight of possibility pressing on both their consciences, as though the discovery had shifted the balance of what they thought they knew about the day, about each other, and about the ripple effects of a single act of quiet kindness. She tucked the envelope carefully into her apron pocket, a private burden and potential key to a greater story, while Ethan studied her with a gaze that combined curiosity, admiration, and a cautious sense of strategy. And in that suspended moment, Emily sensed that the ordinary day she had begun with simple acts of service had just begun to reveal a truth far more intricate than she could have imagined, a truth that promised to unfold in ways neither of them could yet predict, leaving a lingering sense of mystery that would drive both anticipation and reflection for the moments and decisions still to come. Emily Parker carefully unfolded the sheet from the envelope, her eyes scanning the intricate markings and coded references, and then it clicked, a connection she had not anticipated. The folder from earlier, seemingly routine, was linked to a philanthropic trust that her younger brother's school had applied for funding from months ago, a trust Ethan Caldwell had recently overseen personally. Her breath caught as she realized that the stranger she had helped was not merely a flustered visitor, but the assistant carrying critical documents for one of Ethan's high-stakes initiatives. The moment that had seemed random now revealed deliberate intersections of circumstance, and the realization struck Emily with both awe and a slight thrill of fear. Ethan, noticing the flicker of understanding cross her face, approached with a subtle nod, acknowledging the gravity of what she had just uncovered without breaking the silent rhythm between them. "Do you understand what this Means? He asked softly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of respect and astonishment. Emily nodded, the weight of the revelation settling in her chest. She felt the strands of the day weaving into a tapestry far larger than herself. The ordinary kindness she had shown rippling into an unexpected consequence, bridging worlds she had barely imagined. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, retrieving a small card and placing it on the counter with deliberate calm. You may not realize it yet, but you have just influenced decisions that affect thousands, he said, his voice carrying a rare warmth. Emily's green eyes met his, searching for a trace of jest, but found only sincerity and a hint of wonder. The diner around them seemed to recede, the hum of coffee machines and soft chatter fading into a backdrop for this quiet revelation. She allowed herself a small, cautious smile, recognizing that her discreet attentiveness and empathy had catalyzed this moment, yet the full scope of its impact remained just beyond her reach, teasing the edges of understanding. Ethan leaned slightly closer, his gaze sharp but inviting, as if offering a silent acknowledgement that their lives had shifted irreversibly, that what seemed a simple act of kindness had unveiled hidden layers of responsibility and opportunity. Emily held the envelope tightly, the paper crinkling softly in her fingers, a tangible reminder that even small choices could carry profound significance. Outside, the wind tugged at the edges of the diner's signage, the light shifting across the linoleum floor, casting patterns that mirrored the complex web of events now unfolding. A subtle tension lingered between them, a blend of curiosity, admiration, and anticipation, each waiting for the next movement in this delicate dance of revelation. And as Emily Parker straightened the napkins once more, her thoughts momentarily drifted to the implications of her discovery, to the threads connecting her actions, Ethan's oversight, and the stranger's role, knowing that every eye in the diner, every subtle motion, and every quiet decision had combined to create a pivot point in their intertwined narratives, leaving both of them on the precipice of understanding that nothing about this day had been as simple as it appeared. Emily Parker finally placed the recovered documents back into the folder, her hands steady despite the adrenaline that had coursed through her minutes earlier. Ethan Caldwell remained at the counter, his usual composed demeanor softened by a rare sense of respect and genuine admiration. The diner had settled once again into its familiar rhythm, the hum of conversation and clinking of cutlery weaving a comforting background as sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the warm air. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of relief and quiet pride, realizing that a single act of kindness, paying for a stranger's meal, had rippled outward in ways she could not have predicted, leading to a convergence of events far beyond her ordinary day. Ethan stepped closer, sliding the small envelope across the counter toward her, a gesture of recognition and thanks, his gray eyes holding an unspoken acknowledgement of her integrity and courage. "You handled that remarkably," he said, his tone carrying a rare warmth. Emily nodded, allowing a small, genuine smile to surface, knowing that the impact of her choices had extended beyond her own understanding. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of early winter, brushing against the diner windows like a gentle reminder that life's smallest gestures could echo in unexpected ways. Patrons glanced around, sensing something quietly extraordinary had occurred, though none could articulate exactly what. Ethan glanced at the envelope again, considering the possibility that someone so young and unassuming could possess a level of composure, intelligence, and empathy that would inspire trust and admiration in even the most guarded of individuals. Emily returned to her work behind the counter, wiping down surfaces and straightening chairs, her movements calm and deliberate, each one a testament to the quiet strength she carried within her. The realization of how her kindness had set in motion a chain of events, bridging disparate lives and responsibilities, settled like a soft glow over her, and she understood in that moment that true impact often begins in silence, with no expectation of recognition. Ethan watched for a long moment, contemplating the lesson quietly unfolding before him, the power of selfless action, the subtle influence of integrity, and the unspoken language of care and attentiveness. Emily's gaze met his briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that the day had changed both their perspectives, leaving them with a shared understanding of the extraordinary effect of simple, thoughtful acts. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, casting golden light across the linoleum floor, Emily felt a profound sense of clarity that her ordinary life, filled with careful attention to small acts of goodness, held the potential to alter outcomes, touch lives, and command respect without a single boastful word. Ethan turned slightly, glancing back toward the door as if to mark the significance of the moment, and Emily realized that sometimes the world recognizes virtue not through spectacle, but through quiet observation, reflection, and the enduring ripple of heartfelt decisions. And as she gathered the last items from the counter, she carried with her a strengthened conviction that the smallest gestures could matter immeasurably, leaving behind an echo of dignity and kindness that would resonate far beyond the walls of the diner.